What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, let's do a little Middlekauff mailbag. At John Middlekauff. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those direct messages and get your answered question here on the show. Recording this part of the show before Monday Night Football, so just to give you context, depending on what's asked here. Tristan, question for the mailbag. I understand the rules are the rules, but what happened last night in the Eagles-Rams is total BS. Sirianni declines the Rams' offensive holding penalty due to put them in a fourth down. That should be the end of his ability to impact or affect the penalty. When the Rams choose to keep their offense on the field and then the penalty is enforced, it makes a mockery of the decision to decline it in the first place. He should know the outcome of declining that flag and that the Rams staying on the field for a fourth down, 4th and 3, should have been something he thought of sooner. Curious your thoughts. I forget the exact situation now. It's been 4 or 5 days, and I've watched so much football on Saturday and Sunday, but there was a similar situation and chaotic moment in the game on Thursday night in the Steelers and the Jameis Winston-led Cleveland Browns. I am completely in agreement that when you make a decision, do you want, hey, it's going to be 4th and 3 or it's going to be 3rd and 8? Do you want to accept or decline the penalty? What they're going to do once you accept or decline the penalty, you have no control over. Now, you make the decision based on what you think they will do, but once you find out what they will do, you don't get the equivalent of a timeout and then to change your opinion, right? We see it all the time, and it's 4th and 2 late in the game. The defense calls a timeout because they don't like the look, right? Well, that's fair. You get 3 of those. That's your prerogative. You do not or should not. I don't know. You'd have to get Belichick on the horn here. Like, are they not supposed to allow that? Because I thought you don't get, hey, just double checking. You want to decline, right? They're coming out to go for it on 4th and 3. Which, again, if I'm remembering this correctly, it was a 5-yard penalty. And if I would rather have 4th and 3 and get them off the field than 3rd and 8. Because basically they have 2 downs to get 8 yards or 1 down to get 3 yards. Maybe I'm not a great mathematician here, but especially the way their defense was playing, I would take 4th and 3. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think total BS. You should not be able to, any coach, be allowed to change your opinion. Unless, like, hey, I said decline. You accepted it, right? You misheard me or there was a miscommunication. If it's clear, concise, I give you the accept. That penalty is accepted and we're moving on, and you can't say anything about it anymore. So I'm with you. What criteria do you use to determine who is a great quarterback or who you would have a question about? I have seen you and Colin wax poetic about Matt Stafford, who has a 94 passer rating, 9 turnovers, and 15 touchdowns, and the same record as San Francisco, where Purdy has more TDs, better passer rating, etc. But it's not just about them. Jordan Love has 8 good games, but is considered a great quarterback. I don't know who considers him a great quarterback. I think he's considered a high-end talent, but I don't know if people would say he's a great quarterback. But I hear you. With a passer rating of 92. Full disclosure, I have no clue what passer rating means. It means absolutely nothing to me. If you put a gun to my head and said, describe how you get to these numbers, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Maybe other people listening to this, obviously the analytical nerds, I'm sure know. I do not know and don't give a shit. The only way I determine if a guy's good or not is I watch them play. And Kyle Shanahan would take Matt Stafford over the last 5 years over Brock Purdy. Like, that's not an opinion. I know that for a fact. Because literally they desperately tried to get him once upon a time. Matt Stafford's really good and been really good for a decade and a half. Now, if you factor in one guy's 36, like over the next 10 years, who would I rather have? I would just take Brock Purdy based on age. But also Brock Purdy gets judged. Like last year, I saw Matt Stafford go on the road against the Baltimore Ravens defense, one of the best in the league. and go toe-to-toe with their ass in a driving rainstorm. And I've seen Brock Purdy play in some cold games against good defenses not look great. He's had a remarkable career as a Mr. Irrelevant. It's been awesome. Seems like a great guy. Everyone loves him. But like, can I win big once I start paying him $50 million a year? That's so there's context in all this. Like I've seen Mahomes get paid $500 million, a contract for life. And the Chiefs kick everyone's ass consistently since. I don't even know what his stats are this year. I know they're not great, right? You just watch Lamar. You go, yeah, I've never seen anything like that. Josh Allen, like I've never seen a guy that I didn't see John Elway in his prime. I would imagine this is what it looked like. And then there are guys we can argue about, like Kyler Murray. If you've watched football long enough, you know, God, this guy's a freak. But you watch him sometimes in some of these big moments, you're like, God, he didn't play that well. But we know he's really talented. Same thing with Jordan Love. Look at yesterday that game against the Niners. There were some throws, couple that he missed. You're like, a couple that weren't his fault. Watson dropped a big, pass that should have been a touchdown. But you watch him, you go, this guy's really, really physically gifted. So I guess my criteria is just watch. And then I give my opinion. That's the business that we're in. And that's really the basis of sports talk in general, whether you're listening to it or talking with your friends. It's all pretty subjective, right? I mean, there are objective things like who's won the most Super Bowls, who's won the most NBA titles, who has the most MVPs. But it's like, who's the better player? We could argue that. Hell, who's the better coach? Andy doesn't have as many Super Bowls as Belichick, but I could make the argument for Andy Reid. So I just think it's the fun part about sports, I guess. Question for the bag. Chicago Bears lifer. Hey, John. Been a follower for several years. Born in 1996. God, we fucking love that demo around here, baby. Advertisers love to hear it. It's what the dying business of terrestrial radio no longer has. So we welcome you to the show, Jack. Thanks for being a listener. With Eberflus on his way out and Thomas Brown looking more than competent these last couple of weeks, it puts the Bears in another precarious situation. I think the best move is to fire Eberflus now so that Thomas Brown can be the interim the rest of the season. I've always scoffed at the orgs promoting the interim to full-time head coach, as it seems to never work. But if the offense of Caleb continued to progress, it could make sense to give Thomas Brown a shot. Would love to hear your thoughts. I talked about on the podcast on the Open that Eberflus should have been fired a couple weeks ago to put your team in a position where you can start talking to other people. You can start doing what inevitably is going to happen. Right? What's the point of rolling him out? And they didn't fire him after the embarrassing loss to the Patriots, and they just keep losing. Right? It's like, well, we got close against the Packers. Oh, we got close. It's like you've just lost. There are the only, I guess, moral victory here, like you said, is Caleb. Never crossed my mind to make Thomas Brown the interim coach, but yeah, I mean, I don't think I've heard way crazier ideas. Why not? I would get Eberflus out of there immediately. This isn't personal, right? It's not because he's a bad guy. And clearly they like the guy. But like, this is a business and a pretty big one. Billions of dollars on the line. And our franchise quarterback, like, we got to figure out where we're at. And like you said, now that we did keep him a couple weeks after he fired Waldron, we found out, this might have something here. So why not give him a trial run? And I'm pretty sure, do the Bears play? I think they play. I know it's Cowboys, Giants. It is Packers versus the Dolphins. And yeah, it's Bears, Lions. So maybe Thursday night, if they lose the Lions, I guess it's technically Thursday morning for us on the West Coast. I would fire Eberflus Friday morning and just elevate Thomas Brown. So I like your idea. Mailbag question regarding the Chiefs versus the Niners running out of gas. For the Niners, I think it's more mental. They've been playing in as many postseasons as the Chiefs and haven't gotten the playoff and haven't gotten the payoff or even won Super Bowl. But actually, they haven't because they didn't go to the championship game or the playoffs in 2018, and they did not in 2020 as well. So they actually have not. And like the Chiefs, they have some young guys that weren't around in 2020, 2019, or even 2021. So I get it, they've run out of gas, but why haven't the Chiefs run out of gas? They've been doing this longer. While I do think the Niners have done a lot and have been really good over the past several years, they haven't been able to make it like the Chiefs because of a lot of what you talk about, coaching and quarterback. Kyle has been there the whole time, but the coordinators have been poached, while Spags has been there with Andy. The Trey Lance draft picks are catching up. Chiefs have been better at drafting to make up for older players moving on. I really like Purdy, and I'm so grateful for saving the Niners the past 2.5 years. But I don't think comparing the two teams' situations is apples to apples. Well, one huge part is Mahomes is dramatically better than Brock Purdy. And that's not a shot at Brock Purdy. That's just, there's a huge gap there. And Brock Purdy's a good player. And the gap between him and Mahomes is, the size of California. And Andy Reid in his mid 60s is dramatically better than Kyle Shanahan as a head coach. And Kyle's good. And the crazy thing is, I would say the gap between Kyle and Andy, separate from this year, is closer than it is Purdy to Mahomes. And like you said, Purdy saved the franchise because they would have been in major trouble. They would have had to try to get an old Rodgers, sign Cousins. It would have been a disaster. And I would take this version of Brock Purdy. I think where it gets complicated is the Niners tried to have their cake and eat it too. And part of the NFL, I would say this is where it parallels Wall Street a lot. Like, you got to be pretty cold blooded. You got to make decisions that, like, guys you've been in battle with, like, see you later. We're not going to extend you, or we're going to trade you. We're going to get rid of you. And Andy Reid did that. Like, Tyreek Hill is a better player than some of the guys the 49ers have doubled down on. And, like, they should have pivoted off Debo a couple years ago. They should have pivoted this offseason on Brandon Ayuk. They could have pivoted off, Christian McCaffrey held out. And I understand why he did. And they gave him extension because he was looked like Marshall Faulk last year. And then his Achilles both stopped working. And he missed the majority of the season, and he comes back and he looks slow. And as we sit here today on November 25th, he's not even the best running back on the team based on the way he's playing. Honestly, it's not really even close. Mason is. But Kyle is obligated because that's his guy, and he's paid him to keep giving him the ball. Even though in a weird way, it's kind of hurting the team. So I think the 49ers fell trap of what happens to bad organizations and a lot of NBA teams. They keep doubling down. And sometimes, like, Debo looks terrible. And I admire what Debo did in 2021. It was an all-time carry a franchise with Jimmy Garoppolo. Led him to the playoffs. But ever since he's got his contract, it's been very hit or miss. Some hits, some moments, but a lot of, like, are we really getting our money's worth? The answer is no. I would say there's only a handful of guys that they've paid big money that you feel really good about. Kittle's been a badass since Brock Purdy started, became a starter. Trent Williams, for the most part, has been awesome. Fred's fallen off a little bit, having a weird second half of the season, but he's been the heartbeat of your team for a long time in Bosa. But some of these offensive skill guys, and this is what Colin and I talked about, like, they're open about, like, they don't believe as much in the offensive line because their zone scheme. It's like, oh, just give me an average guy. Well, what does that average guy do when he's looking at fucking Aaron Donald or Chris Jones or, I don't know, every team that has multiple good defensive linemen? They're licking their lips to throttle that guy. The 49ers have one offensive lineman over the last 3 or 4 years that you're like, he intimidates the defensive line. The other 4 guys are marks. Now, Pooney, the rookie, good player. But this notion of, like, taking a wide receiver in the first round, it's like, just take an offensive lineman. But they won't. Kyle doesn't believe in it because his own scheme, just get me a guy that can run, positional block. It's like, how about you just give me a good player? For the bag, Hurts missed an open Goddard in the end zone during the second quarter on a semi-tough throw. Quarterbacks like Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Herbert hit it. How far away is Hurts from them? My name's Matt from West Virginia. I don't remember that pass. I don't put him in that category. But his team, like Herbert, I'm doing this before the Monday night game, but obviously Herbert does not have the offensive weapons. Mahomes clearly does not. You got Saquon Barkley. I saw Jared Verse today said that Saquon he's like, yeah, I've never seen anything like that. I've been playing football for a while here. First year in the NFL, a couple years at Florida State. We played a lot of big time teams. Never seen anything like I don't know what that was. It's like, welcome to the show, kid. Because, well, and he's like, you don't see that many running backs that have that level of top end speed because it's really the last thing that, like, Adrian Peterson, Chris Johnson, most running backs, a player can catch them, but it's pretty rare when you get a guy in the open field, like it's a wrap. He's out the gate. And it's, as the announcers say, headed toward pay dirt. And that's what him, Derrick Henry, can do. That's a problem for the Niners right now. Christian McCaffrey gets a little green grass. It's like he's not running very fast. Getting some holiday shopping done this weekend? Pick up some touchdowns. They're on sale at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. What else would you expect from the number one place to bet touchdowns? DraftKings has a doorbuster, profit boosts, and bet one, get one promotions on all type of touchdown bets. Be sure to check the DraftKings Sportsbook app all weekend for flash deals that will have you dancing in the end zone. Grab some TDs with DraftKings Sportsbook. They're on sale from Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the code JOHN to opt in. That's code JOHN only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Love the pod. Dolphins fan. But asking about the Giants. I heard you with Colin talking about them starting DeVito and how you said it was an embarrassment, which is true. Do you think they're possibly starting him because they are actively tanking? Clearly, Drew Lock is miles better than DeVito and gives them a fighting chance. But maybe that's not what they want. Maybe they're actually considering firing Daboll, drafting Shador, and trying to lure Deion away from Colorado. I guess it's possible. If you told me that was their grand plan, I'd be like, that's more impressive than anything they've done in the last 6-7 years. So I really think it was more of a business move. And if they were considering firing Daboll, why wouldn't you just fire him now? Like, what would be? I would just fire him now and start DeVito and just. I mean, he's obviously their team's not playing well, but I would just remove him now if that was the case. So I think you'd be giving them a little too much credit. I also have a hard time. John Mara, Deion Sanders. Like, to me, Deion's got more. Deion, which I appreciate, he's got a little renegade to him. Deion feels Jerry Jones, Mark Davis. I would be stunned if Deion Sanders was the coach of the New York Giants. I can see him the Jets, a little more of a renegade franchise. The Jags, like I have a hard time seeing the Giants. Deion, colors outside the lines, baby. John Mara, I just have I can't see it. Season ain't over yet, but I feel like Saquon has already cemented himself as an Eagle. The same way Deion is always thought of as a Cowboy and not as a Falcon. I actually think of Deion as a 49er. He was one and done, but he won him a title. I would say it's been one of the more impressive starts to a season you'll ever see. It's pretty crazy. Like I don't think it's humanly possible to go any better. And I think the hard part about football with free agency is you just never know. It's not a plug and play sport like baseball or even like basketball, which is somewhere in the middle. there are so many like good players that sign free agent deals, and it just, the scheme, the situation, whatever, it doesn't work. But yeah, man, it's an all timer right now. It's If they were to make it to the Super Bowl and Saquon has an MVP level season, it'll go down as one of the great signings of all time. Because for $27 million, even if this is his best season of his career with the Eagles, if he rushes for like 1,900 yards, I mean, it'd be an all timer, and then he plays well in the playoffs. Safe to say that Antonio Pierce has been a mistake. Think maybe Mark Davis could be blind, but Brady definitely is not. Do you think he ultimately gets fired? And who would your guess be to replace him? My question is this. Mark gave him a sweetheart deal to buy some of this ownership. And from what I was told, and maybe it's been reported, is like he was actively reaching out to Tom. I wonder how much pull Tom has and how active he even wants to be with, like, now maybe Mark's asking him about, Antonio Pierce and the current situation, but it would be a complete guess to go, Tom's really active. I've said before, Mark should bring him in, right? Should try to get him active in the operation, but Tom's kind of busy. Like, Tom on Saturday and Sunday is with calling an NFC game. So it's not like he's at the Raider games. So he's not there. I don't think he's there that much during practice. It's kind of unique because of his job. If he didn't have the broadcasting job, I would say I would be shocked if he's not more involved. But because of the broadcasting job, I don't know, man. Can you make a pod about the Texans and how Bobby Slowick dropped off a cliff with his play calling? Yeah, the Titans are pretty good on defense. That was going to be a tough game. Now, I didn't expect Will Levis to make some of the best throws of the season, but the Titans are good on D. And one thing we know, especially inside on the defensive line, well, where do the Texans suck? Interior offensive line. So I think it's easy to blame Bobby Slowick. It could be, the quarterback. Maybe he's lost some of his confidence. Maybe they're a tag team, like they're both kind of struggling. I love the show. I drive for Amazon. Gets me through the day. Trust me, my home hope keeps that company, like many people, rolling. People keep wondering what the problem is with the Niners, but I feel like this is just a textbook definition of the year from hell. Injuries, older players, and most importantly, Kyle having an off year. I think Kyle is a great coach, but I think he is a huge schematic rut. Does he have to revamp his whole scheme in the offseason, or is it more factoring cleaning up the edges? Yeah, man. Well, he's holding on to this defense like it's 2014. It's like, guys, no one's running the Seattle defense you're running anymore. Can you adapt? Like, what defense everyone's trying to pillage? The Ravens. How about you go hire a Ravens guy? It's like, well, no, we need Pete Carroll from 2014. It's like, Kyle, Pete just got fired last year for the young hotshot, Mike McDonald from the Ravens, who just kicked your ass at Levi Stadium. I think Kyle is a combination of two things. He's obviously really smart. He knows football and the offensive side of the ball really, really well. But he's also very stubborn. Really stubborn. And, he's just a very, very hard-headed, this is not some 68-year-old. Like, this is a young hotshot who kind of thinks he's, God's gift to football sometimes. And it's like, bro, you got to adapt. And I think it's hard when, like Kyle, this is not like, one, Kyle grew up rich. Kyle grew up in a successful world. And since he got to the NFL, mainly is, been a coordinator really fast. And based on like, the Shanahan name, if he sucked, he would have fucking been a position coach the rest of his life. Like, he obviously is a dynamic coach who's had a lot of success and won a lot of games. But like, you got to have some other pitches. And it's like his offense every fucking week, like Kyle, like Why can't you? And I get it because your offensive line sucks. You can't just spread it out and drop back the passing game. It's like you just drafted a fucking wide receiver in the first round. You got Kittle, who you just put in the slot. You got a ton of wide receivers. You're paying Debo a bunch of money. Jawan Jennings under contract. Christian McCaffrey can just flank out as a wide receiver. Why not go like 4 or 5 wide? Why not mix it up? What were they doing yesterday early in the game? The Packers are like, well, they got this guy most people couldn't point out of a lineup playing quarterback. So what do you think Kyle's going to do? He's going to try to run the ball. What's going to be difficult in this game when I don't know? They know the run's coming, the run. But Kyle can't just go, well, we'll just go 4 or 5 wide because that's not what we do. It's not what we do. Why do you think Amazon was so successful? Because his whole thing from day one was like, we'll do whatever it takes for the consumer. It's not about what I think is the right idea. What do they want? Shouldn't that be what an offensive coach does? Like, what do I need to do to win this game? Instead of like, we're just going to run our stuff. And then if the run game's working, all the play action stuff off that, and it'll be easy pickings. I think sometimes he gets very hard headed with that. And I get it was a backup quarterback, but his offense looks the same every week. And it's like when it's working, great. But what about when it's not? Do you think it's possible for the Raiders to hire Spags if they fire Antonio Pierce? I know he had an opportunity to be the head coach for the Rams a while back, and it didn't go well. But he has done an excellent job turning the defense around from the Bob Sutton era. I'm a Chiefs fan and surprising that a team in the division wouldn't try to lure him away. You know, I texted a buddy about this after I read The Athletic did like an in-depth piece that was really, really powerful. It's one of the best things I've read this year. And I said, do you think Spags could be the next head coach of the Bears? You know, Ryan Poles used to work with the Chiefs, knows them. And he's like, no chance. He's like, they would want to fire Poles and Kevin Warren immediately. Like, Spags is 64 years old. And he's clearly one of, if not the best defensive mind in the NFL. And his resume, I mean, he's got 4 championships as a defensive coordinator. And look at some of the list of people he's beat along the way. From Tom Brady to Kyle Shanahan to, you know, you name it. I mean, they beat Joe Burrow a couple years ago, Josh Allen several times, Lamar Jackson. Like, he's beaten Hall of Famers, all-time greats, the best offensive minds. And I think you get to a certain age, it's very, very hard to break through. You know, when you look back, Bruce Arians, who I think was a little younger when he got the Arizona job. Bruce is 72 now. So in 2000, he became the Cardinal head coach in 2013. So he was like 61 years old. And it was a big deal when they hired him because he was an older guy. And it was clear, like, he was a stud, right? But at 64, you get to the point, like, I think it's going to – my buddy told me he would be hard-pressed to see it happening. Not that he doesn't deserve it, not that he's not a stud, but it's just hard once you get to a certain age. And in that article that I read on The Athletic about Spags is Spags was kind of, you know, understands that it might never come again. And he's cool with it. You know, Dan Quinn's a good example. He's been outspoken that he didn't know if it was going to happen. Because last year, if Ben Johnson takes Washington's job, he doesn't get a head coaching job. And he's 10 years younger than Spags. But you could already see that manifest itself into, well, what if Dan Quinn had come back with the Cowboys this year? It's not like he'd probably get a job this all. Like, all of a sudden, you just never get a job to become a head coach. And listen, most GMs never get a second shot. You get one shot, the overwhelming majority of them. Coaching, you can get a second shot, but a lot of times second shots helps to be a little younger. Right? When Andy got hired 10 years ago, he's in his mid-50s. Right? And obviously it had a ton of success with Philadelphia. Belichick, when he got rehired with the Jets, or excuse me, technically had the Jets, but then he went to the Patriots. Like, when he first got the Browns job, he was young. And then when he got rehired with the Patriots, he was, I think, late 40s, early 50s. It's really, really difficult when you get in your 60s. And, you know, in Bruce's case, had never been a head coach in the NFL. I think he was a head coach at Temple in the 80s. But in Spags' case, he was a head coach so long ago and it went so bad. It's just a hard sell. And let's face it, like, these owners and these GMs are going to be more inclined to hire offensive minds. Fair or not? What is a playoff team? Question. You'd consider phony and will get bounced in the first round like Dallas last year. For example, what's a playoff team you think could make noise as a wild card? I would say the Texans and the Falcons are in major trouble. I would say both those teams, uh, you know, if it's Packers, Falcons, and Chargers, Ravens, Texans, I think the teams playing at home could be one and done really fast. I think once you get a little higher, the Bills, uh, the Steelers, if they're playing in a tight game, right, they're comfortable winning 21-18, but you play in that type game where it's 15-14 midway through the third quarter, you're one strip sack away, a fumble, six, all of a sudden you're down 21-15 headed in the fourth quarter, and you got to go, 80 yards, score a touchdown, maybe 7 minutes left. So I would say Pittsburgh would be a team just the way they play. You could say the same thing about the Chiefs. It's just the Chiefs at home are going to just have such an advantage if they have the number one overall seed. I would say whoever wins, if it's like Minnesota against Arizona or Seattle, you would say they could easily lose that game. Chiefs have made at least the AFC Championship game for the last 6 years. How much do those extra games wear on a team? If they're playing one or two more games a season than their closest rivals, does that have an effect? I don't see how it wouldn't. I really don't. I think there's a positive to it. You're very comfortable in that environment. You're very comfortable in these high stress, millions upon millions of people are watching. It's win or go home. Like you are just used to your core group of players just know how to excel in that spot. I also think I don't know, man. Eventually it's going to catch up to you. And I think in the grand scheme of things, like when you take a step back and look at it from 20,000 feet, if the Chiefs were to lose in the first round, let's just say I guess technically if they're the one seed, it'd be the second round. So it's like the one and they're hosting the Ravens or they're hosting the Chargers and they were to get upset because they would be favored at home. It's not really that crazy when you say it out loud. Well, they've won 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls. They also went to another Super Bowl in that stretch. And the one year that they didn't make the Super Bowl, they lost in this crazy game to the Bengals where Mahomes might have had a concussion. Like, it happened to Brady and Belichick. They lost a ton of games. They lost multiple Super Bowls. They lost to Peyton Manning in the championship game when he was with the Colts. They lost to him in the championship game when he was with the Denver Broncos. They lost to the Jets in the divisional round. Shit happens. So I think regardless what happens to the Chiefs in the playoffs this year, obviously if they were to win the Super Bowl, it would be one of the greatest achievements in the history of sports. It would be like a crowning achievement for the organization. You could argue so they would win 3 straight. They've won in 6 years. They've been to 5 Super Bowls and they've won 4 of them with 3 in a row. That's more impressive than anything Belichick and Brady did in the short term. But I got no issue if, it doesn't happen. Whether the Steelers lose to a team that they're better than, fans call for Tomlin's head. They'll say he always loses to bad teams, and Tomlin should be fired. However, to me, the phrase, any given Sunday applies. The guys on the other team are professional football players too. Other good teams lose to worse teams as well, like Baltimore losing to Vegas. I didn't see anyone calling for Harbaugh to be fired. I think the difference with Harbaugh is John Harbaugh was just hosting the AFC Championship game 9 months ago. That happened. Was hosting and favored to win that game. So he was the number 1 seed. He won a playoff game to host the Chiefs. Mike Tomlin, who has done a remarkable job this year, wasn't his finest moment Thursday night. But on the whole, been impressive. Has not won a playoff game since 2016. 2016. We are a month, and as of recording this, about 6 days. So give or take 37 days away from 2025. So you haven't won a game since 2016, a playoff game, and we are 37 days away from 2025. So there's a long period of like, we haven't done dick. And it's not like we've been not winning, like we're in the playoffs all the time. And we just never win playoff games. And we've hosted a couple and lost. Remember I'll give you a little pass. 2020 is a weird year, but they got worked by the Brownies. So I just think you become polarizing when you don't have playoff success. Okay, last question. Fellow Seahawks fan, lives in the Bay Area. I have my opinions about the run game and the offense, but that's not the subject of the mailbag question. I wanted to give you a break from talking about football, so here's my question. What are your top 5 favorite sporting events? To help you out, I'll list mine. The World Cup, March Madness, Little League World Series, like that little curveball, NFL playoffs, World Series. I would say, like, do we take the playoffs as a whole? Because I would say Super Bowl. I would say the NFL playoffs. I would separate the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl. Playoffs are pretty awesome. Super Bowl is the best. I would say the Masters golf is really, really high on my list. I would say, the World Series, when you get the good matchup, like the Dodgers versus the Yankees, and the baseball playoffs in general, I think there's a flow to a baseball game because the home crowds are incredible. The buildup of each pitch is pretty riveting. Like, I don't have a horse in the race, but like watching the Yankees Cleveland series was fucking badass. So I would obviously football, and I would include college football now. The college football playoffs is going to be awesome. Augusta National, um, the World Series / baseball playoffs in general. I think it's just fantastic theater. You know, March Madness doesn't quite mean as much to me anymore. Don't know any of the playoffs or players. A lot of the legendary coaches have since retired. So the group of coaches are not the group that I've grown up on. Um, I don't know if I'd have that. And don't get me wrong, like I watch it and I obviously gamble on it, but I just watch it because it kind of everyone else feels like they're watching it, not because like if you told me I had to miss it, I wouldn't lose any sleep. So I would say football, playoffs, Super Bowl. I'm going to add now the college football playoffs, the 12 teams, which I think is going to be really good. I would say Augusta National, but I think for me, you could include all the majors, the U.S. Open, the British Open. The PGA is by far the worst of the 4, but I still really enjoy it. But there's a huge gap between the other 3. I think the British Open for me is pretty high up there. Augusta's number 1, but I would probably put the British Open number 2, and then the U.S. Open. So I would cluster those together. I'm trying to think. It's funny. When I used to work in radio, especially local radio, you watch so much baseball and you watch so much basketball because you're kind of talking about whatever's going on in your market. And when I worked there, the Giants were winning a World Series and the A's were in the playoffs and the Warriors had Steph Curry. So it's fun to watch these things. And then you start doing podcasts. You're like, I don't really want to watch this. I still enjoy watching the Warriors because of Steph Curry, but I went for like 6 or 7 years where I never missed a game. And part of it was I was doing it for radio, but then even when I got out from podcasting, I just enjoyed watching them. And the longer you do like what I'm doing now, you just watch what you want to watch. And you're like, I'll figure out a way to monetize it. And for me, it's basically just football and golf during non-football, basically after the Super Bowl through, up to training camp. And then I just pick and choose what I watch. Like I've never watched less NBA. I mean, I don't watch the regular season. If a Warriors game is on, I will check it out if they're playing a good opponent. But baseball, I grew up loving baseball. I swear to you, and like I said, I love the World Series and really the baseball playoffs. I watched so many of the Yankee games. I watched probably more Yankee games than I did even the Dodger games. Though the Dodger Padre series was good. I don't think I watched 9 innings of baseball in the regular season total. Now, granted, like I'm a Giants fan. I don't have like major league package, so I'm not gonna watch the Diamondbacks. I don't care. Uh, Tennis, I saw Rafa Nadal retired. I will say this: back in the day, when I was in college and even up through like 10 years ago, if Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer and Djokovic or whatever the matchup were playing in the semis or the finals, I'm not a huge tennis guy. I wasn't missing it. And if you did turn it on and they were playing each other, it was riveting television. I would recommend Rafa has, or not Rafa, but Roger has a documentary on Amazon Prime. I think it might just be called Federer. It's basically the last like 10 days. He retires and then he plays this final. It's called like, I think the Davis Cup. And he's with Rafa Nadal as his teammate, and they play his last match. And I think Rafa just officially retired. And it's just a powerful, like, their careers, how they were intertwined. It's a lot of like Rafa Nadal crying about Roger and Roger crying about them. Just it was a good watch. And I'm not even a big tennis guy, but I would recommend it. So appreciate it. Good question. And we will talk soon, as in tomorrow. So adios.